In this lesson, we take a look at the very important layer and mix nodes. So let me create a new Arnold shader network. And if I search for the layer, you can see we have two layer nodes. A layer node under surface and a layer color node under the texture node. These two nodes are for different purposes, and the layer node allows you to stack or layer up to 8 shaders or surface shaders, and the layer color node allows you to layer up to 8 textures or color inputs. So if I drag in a layer color node here, let's say I have two standard surface shader and I want to basically stack them up using a layer color node. So let's drag a standard surface shader, and let's say it has purplish color like this one. And if I take a look at the layer color node, you can see we have 8 layers, and we can connect 8 surface shaders to these layers and then control their visibility using the layer alphas here. So let's connect the first standard surface shader to layer 1, and now as you can see, this layer shows up in the preview. Now let me control drag this standard surface shader, and let's say create a metallic look for the second layer. So if I just connect this to the Arnold Beauty port instead of this layer color node, this is what we have. Let me just make sure the base color is white. Okay, now we can connect this one to the second layer of our layer shader and then connect the layer shader to the Arnold Beauty. At the time being, we only see this purplish standard shader because the layer 2 alpha is set to 0. So if I increase my layer 2 alpha, you can see in the material preview we start introducing and blending our second standard surface shader, which is this metallic surface. And if I set it to 1, as you can see, the first standard shader completely disappears, and now we only see the second standard shader on top. What we can do is to use a texture and blend these two shaders together. So let's search for an image node here. In the text folder of the project files for this section, let's use one of these black and white maps. Let's maybe use this one. And now if I connect this to the layer 2 alpha, so as you can see, what is happening, where the texture is black, we see our first layer, and where the texture is white, we see our second layer. Now let me just connect this to this shader ball here and run the. So as you can see, using the layer color node, we have blended or layered up these two layers together and then use this image node to drive the alpha of the second layer. Now as you can see, the first layer is revealing itself underneath the second layer. Or let's say I can use a checkerboard pattern here. Let me first of all connect it to the Arnold Beauty to see how it looks on the shader ball. I'm going to increase the frequency to probably 10 and 10. And now we can actually use this as the layer 2 alpha. And let's connect this to the Arnold Beauty. So as you can see now, the checkerboard pattern basically drives the alpha of the second layer, and this way we can actually see our first layer underneath our top shader. Now if I just search for the layer again, I mentioned we have a layer color node as well to layer up textures. So we use the layer shader, which is under surface, to layer materials and shaders and surfaces, but to layer and mix textures we need to actually use the layer color node. So for example, if I just drag this layer color here, and if I wanted to connect the standard surface shader, you can see all the inputs are grayed out because this layer color, as you can see from the color, you can see it has the same color as the image, and the checkerboard pattern is only accepting texture or color input. So if I connect an image node here, I can simply use this as my first layer. Okay, so let me just delete these shaders again, so we have our layer again. So let's try something else. I'm gonna add this standard surface shader again. Let me connect it first of all, Alt W and V to the Arnold Beauty, and let's use this color as our diffuse color. Base weight to 1. I just want to create a reddish metallic surface, so let me increase the IR to probably something like 4, and the specular weight probably something like 0.2, the roughness about probably 0.3 or even 0.4. Probably 0.3 would be enough. Okay, and let me increase the specular weight, maybe something like 0.25. Now let's use this as our first layer and connect the layer node to the Arnold Beauty. Okay, let me just disable our second layer for the time being by decreasing its visibility, because our second layer right now doesn't have anything connected to. Now let me drag another standard surface shader and use this as the second layer. Let's increase its visibility, and now I want to kind of use this white standard shader as some sort of paint on top of this metallic red base material. So let's use an image, and in this case I'm probably going to use this BW23. Let me just see how it looks on the shader ball. I'm going to increase its scale to 2 and 2, probably trying to offset that a bit as well. I don't know, something like this can be nice, and we can use this image as the layer 2 alpha. And let's connect the layer back to the Arnold Beauty. So now, as you can see, we have this kind of white paint on top of our red metal, and if I want to use, let's say I want to use a more complex alpha map to be used as the layer 2 alpha. So let's load another image node, and in this case let's use this one. And right now, because I wanted to combine these two images to be used as my layer 2 alpha, I'm gonna be needing to use a layer color node basically. So in this case, this is the layer color node. So let's use this image as our first layer and use this image. Let me just see how it looks on the shader ball by pressing Alt W and V. So this is what we have. I'm just going to increase its scale again to 2 and 2 and try probably offsetting it a bit. Okay, let's see. Probably something like this can be nice. Okay, now we can use this as our second layer. Let me now connect the resulting layer color node to the Arnold Beauty just to see how the two layers work together. Right now we only see the first layer, the first image, because the alpha of the second layer is set to 0. So if I increase it now, the underlying layer completely disappears, and we need to change the blending mode You can see this, we have this Photoshop blending mode in the layer color node that we didn't have in the layer node itself. Let's try add, and now we have basically both of these two images. Probably we can offset the first image a bit. I don't know, let's see. Maybe something like that. And now we can use this resulting layer color node to the layer 2 alpha instead of this node here that is currently connected. So let me connect that and use this as the Arnold Beauty. Okay, now as you can see, we get this beautiful kind of paint on top of this metallic surface using the layer and the layer color nodes. Now we have two other nodes that do a very similar job. If I just search for the mix node up here, as you can see, we have this mix shader and mix RGBA, and the mix shader is used to blend or add two shaders, and mix RGBA is used to basically mix two textures. So if I just use a mix shader here, okay, let me just drag the mix shader to the work area. Now as you can see, it allows us to connect two different shaders. For example, if I connect the, let me just create some space here. So if I connect the first standard surface shader to my shader 1 and connect the second one to shader 2, and if I connect the output to the Arnold Beauty, now as you can see, we have this mix amount which allows you to control the amount of blending between the two shaders. At 0 we are only getting our first shader, which is this one, and at 1 we are only getting our second shader, which is the second standard surface shader. And we have this blend mode, which basically is the mode by which the shaders are layered, and you have two options, blend and add. The add mode can break energy conservation if not used carefully, and it is intended for adding two volume shaders. For example, if you want to have both Arnold, volume, and fog in your atmosphere, so if I go to my render setting under environment here, so if you want to not only have the atmosphere, volume, or fog, but both of them, you can actually connect them using a mix shader in the add mode. You can change this to add, connect your Arnold volume and Arnold fog, and then connect this resulting mix shader to the atmosphere field under the environment rollout. And also I can use a mix, if I just change this to blend again, I can use a mix map to basically blend the two. So if I just use the same layer color node again here, okay, let's see, as the mix amount, you can see we have the exact same effect like our layer shader, but in the case of the mix node we are only limited to 2 shader. In the layer color node we can have up to 8 shaders, but the mix shader allows us to have other blending modes like blend and add, which can be very useful in case of, for example, adding volumetric effects. We have also this mix RGBA, which allows you to mix up to 2 RGBA inputs. So if I, let's say, let me just connect this as the Arnold Beauty, Alt W and V, and this is the image. Let's just mix these two images. So this is our first input and this is our second input. Now as you can see, if I set it to 0 we are only getting our first input, if I set it to 1 we are only getting our second input, and at 0.5 we have blended the two. There is no blending mode in the mix RGBA. So as you can see, it's very useful, and obviously you can use a texture to kind of mix the two. So let's say if I again use a checkerboard pattern and drag it on top of my mix RGBA, as you can see, it's a bit hard to see because of this two image that we have, this black and white, but at the time being the checkerboard pattern basically if I just go to something like 10, as you can see now blending between the first and the second image that we have connected to our Mix RGBA. Okay, so that's about the layer color, mix shader, and mix RGB nodes in RL for Cinema 4D. I will see you in the next lesson.